the right to choose when you die? The answer is it depends on where you live. Welcome to another episode of Bill Track 50 Beyond the Bill Number. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches the very essence of our personal rights and end of life choices medical aid in dying. I'm Sarah, and joining me today is Stephen. Stephen, how are you?
Hi, Sarah. Great to be here and ready to tackle this very serious subject with you.
To start out with some background on this, on April 9th, so a little bit over a month ago, Colorado made headlines with Senate Bill 68. And this bill is really reshaping the landscape of medical aid in dying in Colorado. The bill modifies existing laws around medical aid in dying, which allows terminally ill individuals to request life-ending medication from a physician. And Stephen, can you kind of walk us through what the main changes this bill introduces are?
Absolutely, Sarah. Senate Bill 68 makes some significant adjustments to those existing laws that you mentioned before. The first big change is that it authorizes advanced practice registered nurses, not just physicians, to evaluate the terminally ill patients and prescribe that life-ending medication, which is obviously a really big change because there are a lot more nurses around than there are physicians. So it does simplify the whole process. Another major change is reducing the mandatory waiting period for the oral requests. It used to be 15 days. Under this law, it will be just 48 hours, so just 2 days.
Wow, that is a substantial decrease. And there's also something about insurance companies in there, right?
Yes, that's right. And that is an important point. So the bill prevents insurers from denying benefits to terminally individuals based on the availability of medical aid in dying.
Mm.
So it stops them also from coercing individuals to choose this option. So it's a safeguard to ensure that these decisions are made freely by the patients and their families, which of course is a really important safeguard.
That is such an important safeguard and, not something I would think about, but wow, like it's really necessary. Um, and Colorado's not the first state to enact these type of laws, though, right? Like the concept actually goes all the way back to Oregon's Death with Dignity Act back in 1997. And since then, I believe 9 states and Washington, D.C. have followed suit, each with kind of their own nuances and different approaches to death with dignity or medical aid with dying. How do these other states and their legislation compare to this Colorado bill?
Yeah, that's right, Sarah. The laws are quite similar, really, is that they're tackling similar problems and coming up with roughly similar solutions in terms of putting the right safeguards and so on in place. Who exactly can sort of prescribe the medication and that kind of thing. But the big difference really is with Oregon and Vermont. So they're the only 2 states that allow non-residents to utilize the laws to receive medical aid in dying. So people from all over the US could go to Oregon and Vermont and actually use those laws to end their own lives. And interestingly, there was a provision in this bill, in the Colorado bill, that would have allowed non-residents to access the medical aid in dying. It was initially included, but it got removed at the committee stage. I think there were lots of concerns about sort of death tourism and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, which people found a little bit distasteful. So they decided it should stay as just applying to Colorado residents.
Yeah, I remember I wrote about Death with Dignity a long time ago, probably in like 2017, and I remember reading a lot of stuff about death tourism with Oregon. So that was interesting. But also with this, there's a pretty big divide on the issue. Like supporters say it's about compassion and personal freedom, and people should have the ability to end their own lives. It's their life. But opponents are worried about, the sanctity of life and potential abuses, this insurance piece or other stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. It's a hugely controversial issue, one that arouses passions on both sides, really. And it's not just in the United States, of course. This is an issue that's being tackled all over the world at the moment, and different countries are coming up with sort of different answers to the question, really. So it's interesting, of course, in the United States, where you have your 50 different states, you can come up with 50 different answers, whereas in most other countries, you're just going to have one answer. So supporters argue that allowing a dignified end is an act of compassion that prevents unnecessary suffering. But the opponents who are often from religious or very conservative backgrounds, emphasize the ethical concerns and the risk of broadening that criteria to non-terminal illnesses, which is obviously the next step. This is something that Canada was considering, actually broadening their criteria to include sort of mental health issues. So people suffering from, say, advanced dementia and so on. They did
Hmm.
in the end, I think, step back from that and postpone that decision for a future date because it was so controversial.
Yeah, I think I remember reading something where they were like, we recognize that you can suffer just as much from a mental illness as a terminal illness, but I understand taking a little while to make that decision because also I feel like people are probably concerned about people who have depression and other things like that. These discussions kind of, you alluded to are reflecting a little bit of a deeper political ideology. It's notable that 9 out of the 10 states and DC are kind of Democrat led, and Montana's in there as, the loner, the outlier, and is the only state where medical aid in dying is legalized that leans Republican. And this was actually done in courts rather than the legislature, which I also find interesting. And I just feel like we generally see Democrats viewing this matter and other kind of matters as personal choice, while as Republicans are, kind of viewing it through this lens of societal morality and what the role of government is.
Yes, precisely. It is interesting, isn't it? Because Republicans are supposed to be the party of personal choice, but there are certain issues where, of course, they tend to stray from that particular doctrine, and this is one of them. And they are extremely concerned about giving government a role in deciding whether people can end their own lives or whatever. They do see as a big brother, really. But with advancements in medical technology, people are living longer and they're not necessarily living healthier lives. So people are experiencing quite long periods towards the end of their life where they're quite unwell, possibly very unhappy. And they would actually, perhaps some of them would want to hasten that end and remove that suffering. So it makes the debate really, really relevant today. And this really difficult job of balancing ethical considerations with personal autonomy.
I mean, to point out the obvious is, to me, the ethical concern is whether you want to give people a compassionate way to die that isn't like full of pain, because, we can all kill ourselves with many things that are in our houses, and it's just a little bit more horrific or dangerous or painful or scary. And, you can always end your own life. It's just if you can, have access to a way that is a little bit more ethical and less awful. So it's fascinating and daunting how these laws can shape such personal aspects of our lives, and it's so important. Like one day we will all in fact die. So currently there's over 60 bills that aim to address medical aid and dying in some way across the nation, right?
Yes, that's right. And I've put a link to them all in the blog post. And this conversation isn't going away. Every year, there's more and more of these bills. Every year, more states are actually considering this. And it's crucial, really, for people to stay informed and engage in these discussions because it is one of those things that we really don't like to talk about. But it could affect you. It could affect all of us when we get towards the end of our life.
Well said. Well, thank you. And remember, everyone, that you can catch episodes of Bill Track 50 Beyond the Bill Number on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Substack, anywhere you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep questioning and stay informed.